Hey everyone, John from Bowstone Studios here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How's it going? Happy Microphone Monday. For the folks that subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll actually notice that this video is posted on Saturday, May 6th. I have a little bit of traveling next week, so I had to record it early. For the folks that follow on Instagram, you'll see it, coming in real time here on Monday. So it's been a few weeks since I've done one of these kind of like microphone overviews that I do when I get a little bit of time. And if I recall correctly, the last one I did was the Electro Voice RE20, which is a broadcast microphone, but it's great for recording vocals. It's great on drums. It's nice on guitar amps and bass amps and stuff, and has relatively good low frequency response and good off-axis rejection. So the unwanted sounds are attenuated in a really great way. So for this week, I wanted to focus on a microphone that's pretty similar, and that would be the Shure SM7 or Shure SM7b, which I believe is the current model. So this is my Shure SM7. I only have one of these. It's not a microphone I use a ton, but it does have some purposes that I like it for in particular. There's a few different options as far as the windscreens go. I actually tend to use a windscreen off of a AKG 414. But you can use a windscreen off of that comes with it, or not use it with a windscreen and put a pop filter in front of it if you want. They're pretty common. Typically, for a broadcast purpose, the microphone actually sits upside down. Is how you'll typically see them in a broadcast studio. If you're like a radio announcer, they can be, of course, placed in any direction, and it doesn't affect the sound. From a perspective of how it's built relatively well. It's a Shure microphone, so it's hard, metal, steel on the outside. There is, when you take off the cover, there is the actual center point of the microphone. You can see mine's a little damaged around this screen here. It's it's probably 20 years old. It's taken some falls over time, and it's probably been hit with a drumstick or two as well, miking drums. So there's a little bit of damage that's occurred. I've never noticed a sound difference with that damage, so I don't expect much. The microphone does come with this mount that has like little side swivel screws that you can adjust. You are a little bit limited on position due to the cabling. So where the XLR cable connects, it comes up through here and then into the microphone. The microphone also has some different filters on the back. So there is a high pass filter, which is one of these little sliders, and then there's also a mid-range boost. So pretty cool. A few other things about it. Well, let's listen to how the filters sound. That was something a comment I got was that I don't necessarily always share how things sound. So now my voice is coming through the Shure SM7 with none of the filters applied, and just using the typical AKG 414 windscreen that I like to use. The microphone, compared to the Neumann condenser I typically use to record these, this microphone does require more gain from the preamp. So the preamps I'm using are the same. So I have a couple Neve 511 preamps, and I have, for reference, I have the gain on the Neumann about half, and I have the gain on the SM7 channel it looks like about 80% up. So that is a difference there. So it is going to have require a preamp with more gain. And sometimes, depending on what I'm using this microphone for, I'll actually use a preamp that's a little bit cleaner. I have some really super clean preamps that I tend to use for like delicate things, and sometimes this is what this requires. If I'm using it on a vocal where I like the mid-range boost that I get, but the singer's maybe not super loud, then I'll have to use something cleaner. So as far as the filters go, let's check them out. There is a high pass filter and a mid-range boost, and typically on a vocal I kind of use them both together. One of my favorite purposes of this microphone would be a vocal that's kind of rocking and screaming, where I don't want as much fidelity as I'll get out of like a Neumann. So here we go. Okay, so that is the microphone with the high pass filter engaged. You'll probably notice that there's a little bit less low end coming through it right now. It's subtle. I think the roll off is something around like 80 hertz, so it's, you know, in a voice it may not be too prominent. Let's put the mid range boost on. Okay, so now the microphone's mid-range boost is engaged, and it's going to have a little bit of a different sound there as well. So you'll probably hear a little bit more articulation as far as like the of my words, like a T or a J or something like those kind of letters that are a little more harsh. You'll hear more of that. I do actually kind of like this setting sometimes on guitar amps. You know, I use the Royer 121 ribbon microphone, which I'll cover when we get to the ribbon microphone segments, and usually some sort of dynamic or usually the combination pair that I go with. So if I'm recording a guitar amp, it may be a Royer 121, and it may be like an MD 421 or a Royer in a 57 or a Royer in the Audix i5, which is kind of like a more high fidelity microphone in that dynamic range. But sometimes these sound really good on guitar amps too. So there are situations where I will use the SM7 on a guitar amp as opposed to using the SM7 on a bass amp or something like that. Like to me, the SM7 does not have enough low end characteristics that make me warrant it on super low frequency things. I have used it on kick drums. Where I don't want a boomy kick drum. So there's, you know, like on the outside. So typically for me on the outside or the outside hole, I'll have a sub kick on the outside, and maybe like right outside the hole, I'll have something like a Beta 52, and then maybe have something more attack like the Audix D9, D6, D9 on the beater. But if I want something for the outside that's not as boomy, then I would switch out the sub kick and I'll use an SM7. And sometimes I'll even kind of position that off angle, so it's kind of like a little sideways pointing towards the outside head of the kick drum. A few other uses for it. It actually sounds really cool on hi-hat. There's like scenarios where I'm going to use a hi-hat mic and I know I'm going to use it. So like let's think something that kind of sounds like the Black Keys where the drums are kind of trashy. And you might kind of want that trashy hi-hat, or even like a hip-hop beat where you actually have real drums though and you want a trashy hi-hat. The SM7 can kind of get you there. It has this cool mid-range. You'll be able to get less bleed in it than you would even with a small diaphragm condenser. You will still probably use an extreme high pass on it in the mix. If you place it top down on your hi-hats, you can place it kind of pointing towards the snare drum as well because of how it's angled. So if you do point it towards the snare drum, you know, you're a few feet away, and sometimes that sounds really good in the mix without high passing it extremely, and other times you'll get like some really weird phase with your snare drum or with your overhead. So you know, it's always a crapshoot on which way is going to work better. So if I'm going to commit to that, though, as far as the sound, I'm going to try to pick a hi-hat mic that I'm going to use, which will probably be this, because quite frequently, the hi-hat mic doesn't make the mix. It's just the hi-hats are normally way too loud in the overhead, anyways, and you're dealing with that kind of problem as opposed to the problem of increasing the hi-hats. But like I was saying, sometimes you can get some really usable snare sound out of this microphone, so from the hi-hat position. As far as putting it anywhere else on a drum set, I don't see any value in it on a snare drum or on a tom or anything like that. Definitely not as like a cymbal microphone. It's just not gonna perform well in that area. But it's great on vocals. If I'm tracking a band live in a room, even if that's not the vocal take that's gonna make the mix, I'll still probably put the SM7 up because the rejection's pretty good. So it's similar roles to RE20s. There's a lot of times where I would reach for a dynamic and not utilize it. So if I'm using the like a horn, if I'm tracking horns, and I tend to like something like a D112, an AKG D112 on horns. I think sounds pretty cool. I probably would not use this in that scenario either. So guitar amps for me, hi-hat, vocals if they're kind of rock, and sometimes outside a kick drum. That's really all my purposes for it are. That's why I only have one of them. So, yeah, so that's this week's Microphone Monday. So thanks for checking it out. Please, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. And I hope to put out some more content soon. Thank you.